What makes any text on the internet worth paying any attention to? This is real. Increasingly, the text is not real. Any random text that you pick.
I can only think that it could be, three things come to mind. You think it might be new information that you can't get elsewhere, or you're trying to use the internet at what it's best at, which is to archive and communicate information. So to read a book or to read someone's interesting point of view, that's your hope, that it would be that. The dark side of that is FOMO. You don't want to miss out. Other than that, maybe that it's either someone close to you or you maintain the illusion that everyone on the internet is as if someone's close to you. You pretend that it's a public square of some sort. I think the people who put together the original patterns of communication on the internet, not Twitter or Instagram, sort of assumed that people would use the internet to then go do this, go be in the real. Yeah. Didn't work out that way. Am I right in thinking that?
There are a few novels, a few stories with people leaving the real world behind, at least mentally. So some writers did think about it. But in general, the engineers, I think, looked forward to a glorious new era in which the wealth of education and information was shared more equally. Still got your microphone on?
No.
Okay, slightly different approach on it. When you read some text on the internet, you're interacting in your head with a list of sources that you consider authoritative, and that list comes from your cultural background. If you're a certain subset of Americans, the New York Times is a source of truth. Different set, Fox News. If you're Russia Today, both of them are equally untrustworthy. So, perhaps we can say you don't take the text by itself. You interact with whatever the sources of force are that can actually act on you, and you know it. and then text from them is relevant, or text blessed by them is relevant.
Now, was there even another way we could have, is there a way we could have played it differently to not end up where we are now? I think you mentioned earlier, we were talking earlier about a common reference point and how that actually often can be a crutch, not a useful organizing tool. And now we all have our tiny little gardens of reference points that are convenient to our worldviews or to our personality. And we've almost got the worst of both worlds, because you don't have the truth and you don't have the organized society around the common reference point. I suspect that this is the only outcome that could have happened with where you talk a lot about lack of friction. Are we actually with the forum trying to do? Are we trying to build a different set of tools? Is it enough to just change one aspect, which might be the costless, frictionless communication aspect?
Oh, I know that will change interaction, because we've seen how having no friction changes interaction.
Sure, that's fair enough.
I think if you spend a lot of time in the engineering mindset, you start to think of text or data as something by itself, because you have to in order to do the engineering. So an electrician or electricity, a power plant designer thinks about electricity on its own terms. A power plant construction company has to think about politics.
Okay, so what was... Sorry, you just finished your set.
I got 3 more.
Oh, okay, I'll hold out then. No, I'm just thinking... Okay, so what were the terms that people were thinking on when they built this frictionless internet? Was it universities, research teams?
It was universities and the defense departments. Or actually, you might be able to say only one defense department, the American, but if I had to guess, I would guess the French defense department was involved in Minitel. As to what they were thinking of the future, science fiction. Information available at the touch of a button.
Oh, yeah.
I read an old blog article by an engineer once who said, if you had told him that people would be walking around in 30 years with devices in their pockets capable of storing the entire encyclopedia, that would be all that he could imagine using it for. He said, I'd just sit there with it all the time. And then we got that, and the game changed. And so what they thought they were bringing to people was an encyclopedia in every house. And for a brief moment, that's what we had. So I remember using Microsoft Encarta, which was amazing.
Microsoft what?
Encarta. It was an encyclopedia project.
Nice.
Loved it. And I love the encyclopedias built into the games. Alpha Centauri, Civilization. That was amazing. And then we hooked everything together and we short-circuited our civilization. And so the hopes and dreams of those who built the internet those came true briefly, and then the world moved on.
Okay. One thing that I've been trying to get my head around is the idea that actually everyone is sort of losing with the current internet. Because I suppose an easy counter, or a logical but not real counter to this reality, is that, well, some of us can still use the internet for encyclopedias.
Yeah.
You could if you wanted, right? But I suppose the reality is that even if you want to, you're still a slave to your urges and social stimuli cycles.
I want you to read the encyclopedia with a large box of 12 different delicious donuts on the table next to you. And at no point during the next year should you touch a donut. This is not a good way to organize your workspace. Can I have the internet without the donuts? No. This is not permitted.
In fact, you have to walk through several rooms with only donuts before you get to the room with the Wikipedia, with the encyclopedia and the donuts.
Because, not to put too fine a point on it, donuts are what people buy. They don't buy encyclopedias. They never really did all that much. It wasn't the majority of people.
My mind's going to, I think is it Plato's criticism? Might be Socrates' criticism of democracy with the, in modern retellings we say the candy salesman that just tells the electorate, I'll give you candy. Whereas the doctor will give you foul-tasting concoctions. I'll give you candy. I suppose in that sense, Plato, or again Socrates, might say, you need a philosopher king to get rid of all the donuts.
To which one can counter, see communism.
That's a good point.
Look, I'd agree with Plato that, hey, having merchants run everything is really unpleasant in a number of ways. Philosopher kings, not necessarily better.
Yes, I like to always think that Socrates' life, again, it might have been actually Plato in this case, one of the two's life disproved that illusion, because they actually went to Sicily and tried to train a philosopher king. I think it was Plato. Yeah. Yes, it must have been. Absolutely. And he, I think, had to flee. So it didn't work out.
Why? Why didn't it work out?
I'm not sure. I don't know the details, actually. It would be interesting to look into it.
Was it that real philosopher kingship has never been tried?
Would the internet look any different if the communists had been around and built their own? Did they build their own? Like their own internal one?
If they did, it was rudimentary. I've never heard of a major one. The only major competitor was Minitel, to my knowledge. They had computers. They had things on the direction of computers, but they were not as good. They were always behind in computer technology, if I remember rightly. But let's imagine they had. Well, up until, I think, the early 90s, commercial traffic was not permitted on the internet. Up until the early 90s, commercial traffic was not permitted on the internet. You weren't allowed to have a business there.
Okay.
It was military and universities and governments. So I guess you could say it would have stayed on that path. Probably would have looked like the old terminals and never really changed unless someone has said we need pictures.
Did it just change? Oh, sorry. Did commercial traffic get introduced because someone thought that was a good idea?
Enough factions in the US thought that that was better than not. Okay, how about this? Maybe this is a good wrap up. The internet, because it presents disembodied information, shorn of physical context, allows us the illusion that information exists outside of a political context. And so I've grown up in an era where you could imagine that text sat apart or existed apart. But anyone from a previous time would have said, no, a letter, a language, an alphabet, a history, a literature, all of these sit within a continuing political cultural organism. And that's the truth of it. So there is no text on the internet. There are different political, cultural, or socio-cultural organisms which produce text. And that's it.
Partly I can imagine the value of an encyclopedia, like an essay, being it's unchanging. I mean, it can change, but as you've talked about, erratas were themselves acknowledged. That you could have several editions of a book, and you could have several editions of an encyclopedia. Or an article. But oh, absolutely, yes, absolutely right. But I can see how and when you have an encyclopedia or an essay in your hand, or I mean, even if it's unchanging, signed to a blockchain or something, you're not constantly questioning whether it's a product of a certain organism anew. It's a once created object, whereas Twitter isn't. It's a different beast every time. And maybe actually, to your thought, it's never even one beast. It's actually a hydra, or a writhing maw. Yeah, the maw of noise. And this is definitely one thing. And this is actually an organism. But it's slower. It's friction. This is very nice. Yeah. The air and everything. Lovely.
Yes. An addendum occurs to me, which is that programmers tend to go mad in interesting ways, or rather it's interesting that they go mad in particular ways. And they always have to do with the abstract overcoming the concrete. Trying to treat the world as if it's a program. Sometimes this is a really useful metaphor if you're thinking about how societies work and how their narratives work, like the Matrix. And sometimes it's really bad. Programmers having fantasies of automating the world, that sort of thing.
I can think of certain billionaires who came from engineering and then go crazy as soon as they enter the media space. Yeah. Good form, StJohn. Even when you're like 1 rep max, that's good form.
All right, should we wrap there?